The most expensive private hospital in Manhattan was celebrating a grand opening. Champagne, red carpet, photographers everywhere. In the middle of all this luxury, a 12-year-old girl walked slowly through the corridors. Her bare feet made noise on the cold floor. Her old, torn clothes contrasted with the luxury around her. She carried a small worn guitar. Her hands trembled, not just from cold, but from hope. On the other side of the corridor, a man in an Italian suit watched everything with disdain. Richard Sterling, 52 years old. Owner of a fortune built on exploiting the weakest. He laughed loudly when he saw the girl. "Look at this. A beggar in my hospital." The guests around him laughed along. The girl lowered her head but didn't stop walking. Richard approached her with firm steps. "Hey you. Can you read? This isn't a charity house." The girl raised her eyes. They were big brown, full of a light that Richard couldn't understand. "Please, sir," she whispered. "My mom is hospitalized here. I just want to play a song for her." Richard burst out laughing. "Your mom? Impossible. People like you can't pay for even one day in this place." The truth was cruel. The girl's mother, Grace, had been transferred there after an accident. A hospital system error. She would soon be sent back to the public hospital. But the girl didn't know that yet. "My name is Hope," she said with a firm voice. "And I believe that music can heal." Richard laughed even louder. "Hope? What a ridiculous name. And you think this cheap little guitar can heal someone?" He grabbed the guitar from her hands and threw it on the floor. The sound of the instrument breaking echoed through the corridor. Hope fell to her knees beside the pieces of wood. Tears rolled down her thin face. "This guitar belonged to my father," she murmured. "It was all I had left of him." Richard shrugged. "Your problem. Now get out of here before I call security." The guests applauded. Photographers captured the moment. For them, it was just entertainment. But something was happening that they couldn't see. A greater force was watching everything in silence. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? I want to know if you're feeling the same as I am. 3 weeks earlier, Hope lived a simple but happy life. Her mother, Grace, worked as a cleaner in several places. She didn't have much money, but she had love to spare. Every night, after work, Grace sat beside her daughter. They sang together while Hope played her father's old guitar. "Daddy said that music is God's language," Hope always repeated. Grace smiled. "Your father was a wise man, my daughter." Grace's husband had died when Hope was only 5 years old. A construction accident. The boss never paid compensation. The family was left with only debts and that guitar. But Hope never lost faith. She believed that God had a plan for her life. At school, other children sometimes made fun of her old clothes. But when she sang during recess, everyone stopped to listen. Her voice was different. Pure. It touched people's hearts in an inexplicable way. One day, the school principal called Hope to her office. "Dear, you have a special gift. Have you ever thought about participating in some music contest?" Hope shook her head. "We don't have money for that, ma'am." The principal sighed. She knew the reality of many families there. Talents wasted for lack of opportunity. But God has His own ways. On that fateful Tuesday, Grace was coming home from work. She was crossing the street when a luxury car hit her. The driver didn't even stop to see how she was. Hope ran to the public hospital as soon as she found out. Her mother was unconscious, with serious injuries. "She needs urgent surgery," the doctor explained. "But we don't have adequate equipment here." That's when the system error happened. Grace was transferred to Richard Sterling's hospital by mistake. Hope didn't question it. For her, it was a divine blessing. Subscribe to the channel, folks. You'll see that this story has many more twists ahead. For 2 days, Hope slept in the hospital corridors. She had no money for food, but other people sometimes shared something. She prayed constantly. Her prayers were simple, but came straight from the heart. "God, I know you can do everything. Please, heal my mother. I'll do anything." On the second day, she decided to play for her mother. She had read somewhere that coma patients can hear music. That's when she met Richard Sterling. Now, kneeling beside the pieces of her broken guitar, Hope felt her heart shatter. But she didn't know that someone had filmed everything. Carlos Rodriguez, a young journalist covering the opening, had captured the entire scene. He was shocked by Richard's cruelty. But he decided not to publish immediately. First, he wanted to know the girl's story better. Carlos approached Hope after Richard walked away. "Hey, are you okay?" Hope wiped her tears. "Yes, sir. God doesn't abandon me." Carlos was impressed by her faith, even in that moment of pain. "Tell me your story," he asked gently. Hope told everything. About her dead father, her hospitalized mother, the broken guitar. Her voice showed no anger, just deep sadness mixed with hope. Carlos felt something stir in his heart. It was as if God was using that girl to touch him. "Hope, would you sing for me?" She was surprised. "But my guitar broke." "Sing just with your voice." Hope closed her eyes and began to sing. It was a song her father used to play. A prayer in the form of music. Her voice echoed through the corridor. Doctors, staff, other patients stopped to listen. It was impossible not to be moved. There was something divine in that voice. Carlos recorded everything. He knew he was witnessing something special. Meanwhile, Richard celebrated in his office. "Finally got rid of that pest," he told his assistant. His assistant, Marcus, remained quiet. He had witnessed the scene and didn't feel good about what he saw. Marcus had worked for Richard for 10 years. He knew how cruel his boss could be. But he had never seen anything as inhumane as that. "Mr. Richard," he risked. The girl just wanted to visit her mother. Richard cut him off harshly. "Marcus, you're here to work, not to have opinions. People like her only bring trouble." Marcus lowered his head. He needed that job. He had a family to support. But something inside him was changing. That night, Carlos published the video on social media. The title was simple, "The Voice of an Angel That Moves Even Stone." The video went viral in just a few hours. Millions of people watched. Everyone was touched by Hope's voice and revolted by Richard's attitude. Support comments arrived by the thousands. Help offers appeared from across the country. But Hope didn't know any of this. She was in her mother's room, praying. A kind nurse had allowed her to stay there during the night. "Mom, I know you can hear me," she whispered. "Dad always said that our family is protected by God. I still believe that." Grace was connected to several machines. Her breathing was weak, irregular. Hope took her mother's hand. "Remember when Dad said that music is the most beautiful prayer? I'm going to sing for you, even without a guitar." And she began to sing. Softly, so as not to disturb other patients. It was her family's favorite song. Amazing Grace, in the version her father had adapted. That's when something inexplicable happened. Grace's machines began to show more stable vital signs. Her breathing became more regular. The nurse on duty was confused. "This is strange. She was very critical just a while ago." But Hope knew what was happening. It was the power of faith. The power of music. The power of love. Hit like if you're as emotional as I am. This story is just beginning. The next morning, Richard arrived at the hospital as always. Arrogant, prepotent, thinking he owned the world. But his assistant Marcus was waiting for him with his phone in hand. "Mr. Richard, you need to see this." It was Hope's video. It already had more than 5 million views. Richard turned pale. "What do you mean? Who recorded this?" The comments were devastating for his reputation. "What a disgusting man. How can he humiliate a child like that? This is the type of rich person who exploits the poor. Shame on this heartless elite." Richard was starting to panic. "Marcus, you need to fix this. Pay whoever it takes to get this video off the air." Marcus took a deep breath. "Sir, the video has already spread too much. I think it would be better if you apologized." "Apologize?" Richard shouted. "I don't apologize to any poor person." But the damage was already done. His name was being associated with cruelty throughout the country. Meanwhile, Hope continued caring for her mother. She didn't know she had become famous. People began appearing at the hospital wanting to meet her. They brought flowers, food, affection. An elderly lady arrived with a new guitar. "My dear, I saw what happened to you. This guitar belonged to my late husband. He would be happy knowing it's in your hands." Hope began to cry. "Thank you, ma'am. God bless you." A music businessman also appeared. "Hope, I want to help you. You have an extraordinary talent." But she shook her head. "Thank you, sir. But I don't need luxury. I just want my mother to get better." Her humility touched people even more. Carlos, the journalist who had filmed everything, returned to do a bigger report. He wanted to show who Hope really was. "Tell me, dear, how do you manage to keep faith even going through so much suffering?" Hope thought for a moment before answering. "My father always said that God doesn't give us burdens greater than we can carry, and that our problems are small compared to His love." Carlos was impressed by that child's wisdom. "And don't you have anger toward the man who broke your guitar?" "No, sir. Dad said that anger is like poison. It only hurts the one who feels it. I pray for God to touch his heart." These words went on national television. Richard watched from his mansion's living room. Something stirred inside his chest. He couldn't understand what it was. How could that poor girl have so much wisdom? How could she not have anger after everything he had done? His wife, Helena, was beside him on the sofa. "Richard, don't you think you should?" "Should what?" he interrupted, irritated. "Apologize. Do something to help." Richard laughed sarcastically. "Are you getting sentimental too? This is just a show to get money." But Helena knew her husband for 20 years. She saw that something was bothering him. The truth is that Richard hadn't always been like this. When young, he had also been poor. He had gone hungry, been humiliated. The difference is that he had let poverty harden his heart. He had promised he would never be weak again. The problem is that, in fleeing weakness, he had lost his humanity. That same night, something unexpected happened. Richard couldn't sleep. He was restless, thinking about the girl. He decided to drive to the hospital. He didn't know exactly why. Arriving there, he saw a different movement. There were people singing in the courtyard. Hope was in the middle of them, playing the new guitar. Her voice echoed through the night. Richard stayed hidden behind a column, watching. It was a surreal scene. Poor and rich, young and old, all together singing. Hope wasn't performing. She was conducting a musical prayer. "Dear God," she sang, "thank you for all the blessings. For the health my mother is recovering. For all the kind people who appeared in our lives. And thank you even for those who test us, because they teach us to forgive." Richard felt something strange in his eyes. They were tears. He hadn't cried in more than 20 years. Suddenly, Hope stopped singing and looked directly at where he was hidden. "Sir, don't you want to join us?" she asked with a smile. All the people turned to look at Richard. He wanted to run away, but his feet wouldn't obey. Hope approached him. "Hi, sir. Do you remember me?" Richard couldn't speak. He just nodded. "I was praying for you today," she said sincerely. "God showed me that you must be carrying very great pain to be so hard." That phrase was like a punch in Richard's stomach. How could that child read his soul like that? Folks, comment what you're thinking. I'm too emotional writing this. Hope extended her small hand to Richard. "Want to pray with us?" He looked at that hand. So small, but offering something he had lost decades ago, forgiveness. Richard began to tremble. I broke your guitar," he managed to whisper. "I know," Hope replied. "But God gave me a new one. He always finds a way." "Why don't you hate me?" Richard asked, still confused. Hope tilted her head, thinking. Dad said that hating someone is like wanting the person to drown, but drinking the poison yourself. It doesn't make sense. Richard fell to his knees right there, in front of everyone. "Forgive me," he murmured. "Please forgive me." Hope placed her little hand on his shoulder. "Jesus already forgave you, sir. Now you need to forgive yourself." It was at that moment that Richard understood what he had lost all those years. It wasn't just humanity. It was connection with God. He had built a fortune, but had lost his soul. The people around were moved. Many cried too. Hope began to sing again. a song about forgiveness and new beginnings. Richard sang along, with a choked voice. It was the first time in decades that he truly prayed. When the song ended, he stood up. "Hope, how can I fix what I did?" She smiled. "You've already started, just by being here. But I want to do more. Your mother needs the best treatment. And you deserve to study music with the best teachers." Hope shook her head. "Thank you, sir. But I don't need luxury. I just need my mother to get better." Richard insisted. "It's not luxury. It's justice. You taught me something I had forgotten, that our true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we can give." In the following days, Richard's transformation was impressive. He paid all costs of Grace's treatment. He hired the best doctors. But he did more than that. He created a foundation to help talented children from poor families. The foundation's name? Hope Project. Hope became the first scholarship recipient. Not just to study music, but to study at one of the city's best schools. But she made one condition: she wanted to continue living in her community. "That's where my strength comes from," she explained. Richard agreed. He was learning that true nobility doesn't come from where you live, but from how you live. Hope's mother recovered completely. The doctors said it was almost a miracle. But Hope knew it wasn't almost a miracle. It was a miracle indeed. On the day Grace was discharged, there was a party at the hospital. Staff, patients, families, all celebrating. Hope sang a song of gratitude. Her voice seemed even more beautiful. Richard was there, beside his wife Helena. They had reconciled too. His transformation had saved their marriage. "Thank you, God," Hope sang. "For showing that there's no heart you can't change. For showing that love always wins." Marcus, Richard's assistant, was also there. He had been promoted to foundation director. His conscience was finally at peace. Carlos, the journalist, filmed everything. He had followed the entire journey. He knew he was documenting something special. The final video, showing the complete transformation, went even more viral than the first. Millions of people watched. Many were inspired to change too. Comments arrived from around the world. "What a blessed girl. That's the power of faith. I was moved to the end. I'm going to help a child too." Hope's story had touched hearts on all continents. 1 year later, the Hope Project Foundation had already helped more than 1,000 children. Richard had sold half of his assets to finance the project. But he was happier than ever. "I've never been so rich," he said. "Because now I have purpose." Hope continued singing. Her music had spread around the world. But she never forgot her roots. Every week, she returned to her old community to sing in church. "God gave me this gift to share," she always said. Her humility continued touching people. On a Sunday afternoon, Hope was singing in church when a lady approached her. "My dear, you saved my life." Hope was confused. "How so, ma'am?" "I was about to give up everything. I saw no more meaning in living. Then I watched your video. Your faith gave me strength to start over." Hope hugged the lady. "It was Jesus who saved you, ma'am. I just sang." "But you sang at the right time," the lady replied, crying. Stories like this arrived every day. People who had changed their lives after meeting Hope. She had become a symbol that it's possible to keep faith even in difficulties. Richard also received letters. Businessmen who had been inspired by his transformation to be more generous. "Your story made me rethink everything," wrote one of them. "Now I use my company to help, not just to profit." The change had created a chain of good. On a special morning, Hope woke up to a surprise. Her mother was preparing breakfast with an enormous smile. "Daughter, a special letter arrived for you." It was a letter from the Vatican. The Pope had heard her story and wanted to meet her personally. Hope was speechless. "Mom, is this real?" Grace laughed. "God has bigger plans for you, my daughter." The trip to Rome was exciting. Hope had never left her city. On the plane, she looked out the window and thanked God for each blessing. Richard offered to accompany them, but Hope asked to go only with her mother. "It's our special moment," she explained. He understood and respected. At the Vatican, Hope sang for a special audience. Cardinals, bishops, people from around the world. Her voice echoed through the Sistine Chapel. It was as if angels sang along. The Pope was moved. "My child, God speaks through you." Hope kissed the papal ring with reverence. "Thank you, Holy Father. I pray to always be worthy of God's trust." That humility before such honor impressed everyone. Back in the United States, life continued simple. Hope studied music, but also math, literature, history. "Knowledge is another gift from God," she always said. Richard visited the family every week. He had become like a grandfather to Hope. "Uncle Richard," she called him affectionately. He had insisted she call him uncle, not sir. Family has no hierarchy, he had learned. In one of these visits, Hope asked a question that surprised him. "Uncle Richard, are you happy now?" He thought for a moment. "You know, Hope, before I thought happiness was having everything. Now I discovered it's giving everything." She smiled. "Dad said that too. That the joy of giving is greater than receiving." Richard nodded. "Your father was a wise man. Too bad I didn't know him." "But you do know him," Hope said. "Dad lives in every song I sing. In every person we help. He's here with us." At that moment, Richard felt a deep peace. He had found his spiritual family. The foundation grew every day. Talented children from across the country were helped. But Hope insisted on personally knowing each one. "Everyone has a story," she said. "And every story deserves to be heard." Her natural empathy made the children feel special. One of them, a boy named John, had lost his parents in an accident. "Hope, how do you manage to be so strong?" he asked. "I'm not strong, John. I just have faith. And faith isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and trusting anyway." These conversations were filmed and shared. They became a series of inspirational videos. Conversations with Hope became one of the country's most watched channels. People of all ages watched to receive advice and inspiration. But Hope never charged anything for it. "God gave me for free," she explained. "I have to give for free too." In a special edition of the program, Richard was invited to tell his version of the story. "I was a lost man," he confessed in front of the cameras. "I had everything materially, but was spiritually miserable." He told how Hope had changed his life. "She showed me that true wealth is in serving others, in being God's instrument." Tears rolled down his face as he spoke. "If I could go back in time, I would never have broken that guitar. But I thank God because, through my mistake, He showed the power of forgiveness." The program was watched by millions. It generated a wave of reflection about forgiveness and transformation. Many people wrote telling their own experiences of change. Hope and Richard's story had become universal. Share in the comments your own stories. How has faith changed your lives? I'm curious to read them. 5 years had passed since that fateful day at the hospital. Hope was now 17 years old. She had become a beautiful young woman, but her greatest beauty continued being interior. She had recorded 3 albums. All profits went to the foundation. "Money is just a tool," she always said. "What matters is how we use it." Richard, now 57 years old, had completely changed. His company still made profit, but now operated with total social responsibility. Employees had excellent health plans, daycare for children, study scholarships. Company is extended family, he had learned from Hope. Helena, his wife, ran the human resources department. They worked together like never before. The couple had adopted 2 children through the foundation. The house, once empty, now vibrated with laughter. Marcus continued as foundation director. He had married one of the project's teachers. Even Carlos, the journalist, had changed careers. He became an inspirational content producer. "After that story, I couldn't do regular journalism anymore," he explained. The transformation had created a network of people dedicated to good. On a special night, the foundation completed 5 years. There was a party in the same hospital where everything began. The place had been renovated and expanded. Now it served needy families for free. Hope went up on stage to sing. She looked at the audience and saw hundreds of children who had been helped. She saw Richard and Helena with their adopted children. She saw her mother, radiant with pride and health. She saw hospital staff, many who had witnessed the original scene. 5 years ago, she began to speak, I was just a scared girl who wanted to sing for her mother. The audience fell into silence. God used my pain, my fear, even the cruelty I suffered, to teach about love. She looked at Richard, who was in the front row. He used a hardened heart to show that no one is lost forever. Richard wiped his tears discreetly. And he used a broken guitar to show that God can create new music from any destruction. Hope picked up the guitar, not the new one she had received, but a restored version of the original. Carlos had kept the pieces and hired a special luthier to rebuild it. This guitar was broken, but it was fixed, she said, caressing the instrument. Like all of us. And she began to sing the same song she had sung on the first night, when Richard heard her hidden. But now the entire audience sang along. It was a chorus of hundreds of voices, coming from different social classes, ages, stories. United by faith and love. Richard sang too, with a firm and emotional voice. His transformation was complete. When the song ended, there was an emotional silence. Then, an explosion of applause that seemed endless. Hope came down from the stage and walked to Richard. Uncle Richard, thank you for teaching me that everyone deserves a second chance. He hugged her like the daughter he never had. Thank you for teaching me that God never gives up on us, he replied. At that moment, a journalist approached for an interview. Hope, what's your message for people watching? She thought for a moment, looking at all those lives that had been touched. That there's no heart God can't change. That there's no situation He can't transform. And that love always, always wins. The journalist turned to Richard. And you, sir, what was the greatest lesson? Richard smiled, looking at Hope. That a pure heart can move mountains. And that true wealth is in being God's instrument in people's lives. The camera captured the perfect moment, Hope and Richard, side by side, representing the transformation that love can operate. 2 years later, Hope graduated from high school as valedictorian. She had received offers from universities around the world. But she chose to stay in the United States. My mission is here, she explained. She decided to study music education. She wanted to train new teachers for the foundation. I'm going to multiply what I learned, she said at graduation. Richard was in the audience, crying with pride. Beside him, Grace radiant. Her daughter had become everything she had dreamed. Your husband would be proud, Richard whispered to her. He is proud, Grace replied. I'm sure he sees everything from heaven. That night, there was a party in the community where Hope grew up. The girl who had left there poor and unknown returned as a graduate, but with the same humility as always. Never forget, she told the neighborhood children, you are God's children. That means you're capable of anything. A little boy raised his hand. Hope, will you become famous and forget about us? She knelt to his height. Never. You are my family. My heart is here. The children surrounded her, asking her to sing. Hope picked up her guitar and began a new song she had composed. It was about roots, about never forgetting where we come from. Richard, who had followed everything from afar, approached. Can I sing along? He asked timidly. The children laughed and clapped. Come on, Uncle Richard. He sang with them, off-key but happy. It was the perfect image of redemption. The man who had despised the poor now sang among them, accepted as family. The next day, Hope made a special visit. She went to the cemetery where her father was buried. She brought the original guitar, the one that had been restored. Hi, Dad, she said, kneeling before the simple grave. I came to tell you the news. The wind swayed the flowers she had brought. Remember you said God had special plans for me? You were right. She played some notes on the guitar. I got to study music, Dad. And I'm helping other children too. Tears rolled down her face, but they were tears of gratitude. And you know what else? That man who broke the guitar became our friend. God changed his heart. A butterfly landed on the grave at that moment. Hope smiled. Hi, Dad. I knew it was you. She sang her father's favorite song. Her voice echoed through the silent cemetery. Other people visiting their loved ones stopped to listen. It was impossible not to be moved. When she finished, a lady approached. My daughter, thank you. I hadn't been able to visit my husband for months without crying. Today, for the first time, I left here in peace." Hope hugged her. "God uses music to console hearts, ma'am." These small miracles constantly happened around Hope. She had become a divine instrument of emotional healing. At university, her professors were impressed by her dedication. "Hope, you have talent to be a great international singer," said one of them. "Thank you, Professor. But my dream is to train great teachers." Her humility continued being her trademark. During college years, she continued working at the foundation. Now there were more than 50 units spread across the country. Thousands of children were served. But Hope insisted on personally knowing each story. "Numbers are important," she said, "but people are more important." Richard, now 60 years old, had been decorated by the government for his services to education. At the ceremony, he called Hope to the stage. "None of this would be possible without this extraordinary young woman," he said to the microphone. The audience stood in applause. Hope tried to refuse credit, but Richard insisted. "She taught me that true leadership is serving others." After the ceremony, journalists surrounded them both. "Mr. Richard, how would you summarize your transformation?" He looked at Hope and smiled. "I died to myself and was born for others. And I discovered that's the only way to truly live." A reporter asked Hope, "And you, what would you say to someone going through difficulties?" "That God is never late. Sometimes it takes longer than we'd like, but He always has the best plan." These words were reproduced in newspapers worldwide. Hope's wisdom had crossed borders. On a special morning, she received an unexpected call. It was from a Hollywood producer. They wanted to make a movie about her story. "It would be an incredible opportunity to spread your message," he argued. Hope asked for time to think. She talked with her mother, with Richard, with her spiritual mentors. Everyone encouraged her. "Your story can touch millions of lives," they said. But she had one condition: all movie profits would go to charitable foundations. "If it's to glorify God, I can't profit from it," she explained. The producer accepted immediately. Hope's integrity impressed him. The film was a worldwide success. Not only did it raise millions for charity, but inspired a new wave of kindness. People worldwide began creating their own help initiatives. The Hope effect spread across all continents. Needy children were adopted, foundations were created, hardened hearts opened. A poor girl's simple story had changed the world. At the movie premiere, Hope went up on stage at the biggest theater in New York City. She wore a simple dress, but was radiant. "Thank you to everyone who believed in this story," she said to the microphone. "But remember, I'm not the hero. The hero is God, who uses broken vessels to perform miracles." The audience was in tears. Richard was in the front row, beside Grace and Helena. His chosen family, united by love. "And also remember," Hope continued, "that each of you has a hope inside. A light that can illuminate the world." She picked up her guitar and sang the movie's theme song. It was her own composition, about second chances and redemption. The entire audience sang along in the chorus. "Love always wins, always wins. God doesn't give up on anyone. Love always wins, and transforms evil into good." It was a magical, unforgettable moment. 10 years had passed since that day at the hospital. Hope, now 22 years old, graduated in music education with honors. She had become a worldwide reference in transformative education. Her thesis on music as a social healing tool was translated into 15 languages. But her greatest pride were the more than 10,000 teachers she had trained. "They will multiply love much more than I could alone," she always said. Richard, now officially her godfather, was at graduation. At 65 years old, he had found his true vocation, being spiritual grandfather to hundreds of children. His transformation had become legend. Business schools studied his case as an example of transformational leadership. But he always redirected credit. "It all started with a girl who taught me to forgive." At the graduation party, Hope gave an emotional speech. 10 years ago, I was just a scared child who wanted to sing for her sick mother. The audience listened in religious silence. God used my pain to teach about healing. Used my poverty to teach about true wealth. Used even the cruelty I suffered to teach about forgiveness. She looked at Richard, who was wiping tears. And he used a hardened heart to show that no one is lost forever. The applause was deafening and lasted more than 5 minutes. That night, there was a special surprise. Carlos, the journalist who had filmed everything, appeared with an old box. "Hope, I kept this for all these years waiting for the right moment." It was the original tape of the first video, the one that had changed everything. "I want you to have it. It's part of your story." Hope held the tape lovingly. "Thank you, Carlos. You were God's instrument that day." "We all were," he replied. "Everyone had their role in the divine plan." It was true. Every person involved in the story had been crucial for the final result. Even the nurse who let Hope stay in her mother's room had been important. God had orchestrated everything perfectly. At the end of the party, Hope asked everyone to join in a big circle. "Let's thank together," she suggested. Rich and poor, young and old, all holding hands. Hope conducted a sung prayer, her specialty. "Thank you, God, for teaching us that love is stronger than hate. That forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. That faith moves mountains." Her voice rose, carrying everyone's emotions. "And thank you for showing us that when we unite in love, we're capable of any miracle." The entire circle sang in unison. It was like a heavenly choir. At that moment, everyone felt the presence of something greater. A peace that surpassed understanding. It was God approving the work that had been done in His name. When the music ended, there was a sacred silence. Then, emotional hugs. Tears of gratitude. Promises to continue the work. That night marked the end of one phase and the beginning of another even greater. Hope had planted seeds that would bear fruit for generations. Her simple story had become eternal. A poor girl who forgave the one who humiliated her. A rich man who learned to love. A mother who was healed by her daughter's faith. A broken guitar that became a symbol of restoration. A song that became a worldwide prayer. And above all, living proof that God uses the small to confound the great. Years continued to pass, and Hope's influence only grew stronger. She opened the first Hope Academy in Brooklyn, where underprivileged children could receive world-class music education for free. The academy became a model copied across America. Richard funded the construction, but Hope insisted on teaching there personally 3 days a week. "These kids need to see that dreams are possible," she explained. On her 25th birthday, Hope received a special honor. The mayor of New York declared it Hope Sterling Day throughout the city. Yes, Sterling. She had legally taken Richard's last name when he officially adopted her as his daughter 2 years earlier. "Family isn't about blood," she had said at the adoption ceremony. "It's about love." The ceremony at City Hall was attended by thousands. Children from all 5 boroughs came to celebrate the young woman who had changed so many lives. Hope stood at the podium, looking at the sea of faces before her. "When I was 12 years old, I thought my biggest problem was a broken guitar," she began. The crowd laughed softly. "I didn't know that God was going to use that broken guitar to build something beautiful." She gestured to the crowd. "All of you. This community. This love." Behind her sat Richard and Grace, now both in their 60s, beaming with pride. Helena and Marcus were there too, along with their families. Carlos, now a best-selling author who had written Hope's biography, recorded everything. "Every broken thing can be made beautiful again," Hope continued. "Every hardened heart can learn to love. Every lost soul can find their way home." The crowd erupted in applause. That evening, there was a concert in Central Park. Hope performed with the New York Philharmonic, but the real stars were the children from her academies. Over 200 kids from different backgrounds sang together in perfect harmony. Rich kids from Manhattan stood beside poor kids from the Bronx. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, all united in song. It was the physical manifestation of Hope's dream, a world where music broke down every barrier. In the VIP section, Richard watched with tears streaming down his face. The man who once threw a guitar on the ground now funded an entire musical movement. His transformation was complete, but it never stopped growing. "She did it," he whispered to Grace. "She actually changed the world." Grace smiled. Her father would be so proud. "He is proud," Richard replied. "I can feel him here with us." After the concert, a young reporter interviewed Hope backstage. "Miss Sterling, what's next for you?" Will you run for political office? Start your own record label? Hope laughed gently. None of that. I'm going to keep doing what I've always done. Which is loving people, teaching children, serving God. The reporter seemed surprised by the simplicity of her answer. But don't you want more? Fame? Fortune? Power? Hope shook her head. I learned from the best father in the world that those things are empty without love. She glanced toward Richard, who was signing autographs for children. Real power is in lifting others up. Real wealth is in giving everything away. Real fame is when God knows your name. These words went viral on social media within hours. #RealWealth, #HopeSterling, #GodKnowsYourName became trending topics worldwide. But Hope wasn't on social media to see it. She was helping clean up after the concert, just like she did after every event. Humility had remained her greatest virtue. A few months later, Hope received news that changed everything. Grace had been diagnosed with cancer. The same woman who had been miraculously healed years earlier now faced her greatest battle. Hope took a leave of absence from all her projects to care for her mother. Family comes first, she announced to her team. Richard offered to hire the best doctors, fly Grace to the top cancer centers. But Grace had a different request. I want to spend my remaining time at home, surrounded by love. So that's what they did. Hope moved back to her childhood apartment in Queens. Every day, she sat beside her mother's bed and sang the same songs her father had taught them years ago. Grace's condition deteriorated slowly, but she remained at peace. Hope, she said one afternoon, I'm not afraid. I know, Mama. God is with you. He's always been with us, hasn't he? Through everything. Hope nodded, holding her mother's fragile hand. Even when that man broke your guitar, God had a plan. Especially then, Hope agreed. Grace smiled weakly. Promise me something. Anything. Keep singing. No matter what happens to me, keep singing. I promise, Mama. That night, Grace Sterling passed peacefully in her sleep. Hope was holding her hand, singing Amazing Grace softly. The funeral was unlike anything New York had ever seen. Thousands of people lined the streets as the procession made its way to the cemetery. Children from Hope's academies sang hymns. Adults wept openly for a woman they had never met but whose daughter had touched their lives. At the graveside service, Hope stood to speak. Her voice was steady, though tears flowed freely. My mother taught me that love never dies. It just changes form. She looked at the massive crowd. Mama's love lives on in every child we help, every song we sing, every heart we heal. Richard stepped forward and put his arm around her shoulders. She also lives on in the miracle of our family, he added. Grace taught me that a parent isn't someone who gives you life. It's someone who teaches you how to live. The crowd was deeply moved. After the service, many people approached Hope with their own stories of loss and healing. She listened to each one, offering comfort through her presence alone. Even in her grief, she continued to be a source of strength for others. In the weeks that followed, Hope struggled with profound sadness. For the first time in her adult life, she couldn't sing. Every time she tried, she would break down crying. Richard was worried about her. Maybe you should talk to someone, he suggested gently. I talk to God, Hope replied. But he seems quiet lately. This concerned Richard even more. Hope's faith had always been unshakable. One evening, he found her sitting in her old room, holding her father's restored guitar. I can't do it anymore, she whispered. I can't pretend to be strong. Richard sat beside her on the bed. You don't have to pretend anything. It's okay to be broken sometimes. But everyone depends on me. The foundation, the kids, the teachers. We'll manage, Richard assured her. What you need right now is to heal. Hope looked at him with grateful tears. How did I get so blessed to have you as a father? I'm the blessed one, he replied. You saved my life, remember? They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then, quietly, Hope began to strum the guitar. Just a few simple chords. No words, just music. It was the first time she had played since Grace's death. Richard listened, saying nothing. Slowly, very softly, Hope began to hum. Then, barely above a whisper, she sang. When I can't see the way ahead, and my heart is full of pain, I remember that you're with me, through the sunshine and the rain. Her voice grew stronger with each line. Mama's in your arms now. Daddy's singing harmony. And someday we'll all be together. For eternity. By the end of the song, both Hope and Richard were crying. But they were tears of release, not just sadness. She's proud of you, Richard said. Both your parents are. Hope nodded, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. I think I'm ready to sing again. The next Sunday, Hope returned to her childhood church. She hadn't been there since the funeral. The congregation was surprised to see her, but welcomed her warmly. When the pastor called for anyone who wanted to share, Hope slowly stood. She walked to the front of the small church, guitar in hand. I've been angry with God, she admitted to the congregation. A few people gasped softly. I thought, after everything we've been through, after all the miracles, he would spare my mother. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But yesterday I realized something. God didn't spare his own son. Why would he spare my mother from the human experience? The congregation listened intently. Death isn't the end of love. It's love graduating to its highest form. Hope began to play her guitar. This song is for my mama. And for anyone else who has lost someone precious. She sang a new composition, written that very morning. Love doesn't end when breathing stops. Love doesn't fade when hearts grow still. Love just changes. Love transcends. Love continues, always will. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. When she finished, the entire congregation stood and applauded. But more than that, they felt hope renewed in their own hearts. That performance was filmed by someone in the audience and shared online. Within days, it had been viewed by millions. Comments poured in from people around the world who had lost loved ones. This gave me comfort in my darkest hour. Now I understand, love never dies. Thank you for helping me heal. Your mother raised an angel. Hope was back. Not the same as before. Grief had deepened her compassion and matured her faith. But she was singing again, and the world needed her voice. 6 months later, Hope established the Grace Sterling Memorial Foundation. Its mission: to provide comfort and support for families dealing with terminal illness. The foundation offered music therapy, counseling, and practical assistance. But most importantly, it offered hope in the darkest times. Hope personally visited families, singing for patients who couldn't afford concert tickets. She sat with dying children and helped them write songs for their parents. She comforted grieving spouses and taught them that love transcends death. Her work in hospices and hospitals became legendary. Medical staff said she had an almost supernatural ability to bring peace to the dying. It's not supernatural, Hope would say. It's just love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. On the first anniversary of Grace's death, Hope organized a massive memorial concert. It was held at Madison Square Garden, with all proceeds going to cancer research. The concert featured dozens of artists Hope had mentored over the years. But the most powerful moment came when she sang solo. Just Hope, her guitar, and 20,000 people in complete silence. She sang the song she had written for her mother, now called Love Continues. As she sang, photos of Grace appeared on the giant screens. Grace holding baby Hope. Grace teaching her to sing. Grace celebrating Hope's graduation. Grace at the adoption ceremony with Richard. By the end, the entire arena was singing along. Love doesn't end when breathing stops. Love doesn't fade when hearts grow still. Love just changes. Love transcends. Love continues, always will. The book became an instant bestseller, but Hope donated all proceeds to medical research. In the final chapter, she wrote, I've learned that God doesn't waste anything, not our pain, not our mistakes, not even our brokenness. He takes the fragments of our lives and creates something more beautiful than we ever imagined possible. That little girl who had her guitar smashed by a cruel man never could have envisioned this life. The man who did the smashing never could have imagined becoming a father through love rather than blood. But God saw it all. He orchestrated every moment, used every tear, transformed every broken piece into part of his perfect symphony. We are all instruments in God's hands. Some of us are violins, some are drums, some are flutes. But every instrument is necessary for the full song to be heard. My prayer is that this story reminds you that your life has meaning, your pain has purpose, and your song, whatever it may be, is needed in this world. Keep singing. Even when your voice breaks. Even when your heart breaks. Even when your instrument breaks. God can make music from anything. Love always wins. Faith always matters. And hope, true hope, never dies. The book inspired millions around the world. Translation rights were sold to over 50 countries. Hope's message of redemption and second chances resonated across all cultures and faiths. On her 50th birthday, New York City unveiled a statue in Central Park. It depicted a young girl holding a broken guitar, with a man kneeling beside her in repentance. The plaque read, "Hope Sterling, she taught us that broken things can be made beautiful." Richard, now 84 and confined to a wheelchair, was wheeled to the front for the ceremony. His mind was still sharp, but his body was failing. "Daddy," Hope said, using the name she had called him for 20 years, "are you proud?" Richard smiled with tears in his eyes. "Hope, you've exceeded every dream I never dared to have. Your father would be so proud. Your mother would be so proud. And I am proud beyond words." He paused, gathering strength. "But most importantly, God is proud. You've been His faithful servant." That night, Richard Sterling passed away peacefully in his sleep. His final words, spoken to Helena earlier that day, tell Hope that meeting her was the greatest blessing of my life. She saved my soul. Hope spoke at his funeral to a packed cathedral. Richard Sterling was proof that no one is beyond redemption. He taught me that it's never too late to change, never too late to love, never too late to find God. When I was 12, I saw only a cruel man who broke my guitar. But God saw a broken man who needed healing. Through forgiveness, we both found wholeness. Today I say goodbye to my earthly father, but I know he's reunited with my heavenly Father. And someday, we'll all sing together again. Hope continued her chaplain work until she was 65. Thousands of patients and families had been comforted by her presence over the years. Her reputation had spread internationally, and she was often called to minister to heads of state and celebrities in their final moments. But she never forgot her first calling, to serve the forgotten and the poor. On her retirement day, the hospital held a celebration. Hundreds of people whose lives she had touched returned to honor her. Former patients, grateful families, fellow chaplains, doctors and nurses who had witnessed her ministry. But the most moving tribute came from an unexpected source. A young girl, about 12 years old, stood to speak. "My name is Faith Johnson. Chaplain Sterling sang to me when I was dying of leukemia 5 years ago. The doctors said I wouldn't make it. But her voice gave me strength to fight. I'm cancer-free now, and I want to be a chaplain just like her." Hope wept as she listened to Faith's words. The circle was continuing. Her final act as hospital chaplain was to sing Amazing Grace in the same room where she had first sung to her dying mother 53 years earlier. Her voice, now weathered by age but still pure in spirit, filled the space with the same healing power it had always carried. In retirement, Hope moved back to her childhood neighborhood in Queens. The area had been transformed over the decades, gentrified and expensive. But Hope bought her old apartment building and converted it into affordable housing for struggling families. She lived in the same small apartment where she had grown up, surrounded by memories of her parents and Richard. Every evening, she would sit on the fire escape where she used to sing as a child. Now she sang for a new generation of neighborhood kids, teaching them the same songs her father had taught her. On Hope's 70th birthday, a documentary about her life premiered on television. The girl who sang Hope traced her journey from that traumatic day in the hospital to her decades of ministry. The documentary won every major award and was seen by over 100 million people worldwide. But Hope didn't attend the premiere. Instead, she was in her neighborhood, teaching guitar to a little boy whose father had recently died. "Music is prayer," she told him, the same words her father had spoken to her so many years ago. At 75, Hope's health began to decline. She had lived a full life, touched countless souls, and fulfilled every purpose God had planned for her. As she lay in her childhood bed, surrounded by photos of Grace, her father, and Richard, Hope felt complete peace. The same nurse who had cared for her mother decades earlier, now elderly herself, came to visit. "Hope, is there anything you need?" Hope smiled weakly. Just sing with me one more time. Together, they sang Amazing Grace, the song that had defined Hope's entire life. When they finished, Hope looked toward the window where light was streaming in. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what, dear?" "The music. It's so beautiful." Hope Sterling closed her eyes and smiled. She had heard the music of heaven calling her home. Her funeral was attended by thousands. Presidents and paupers sat side by side, united in mourning and celebration. But the most powerful moment came when Faith Johnson, now a chaplain herself, stood to speak. Hope Sterling taught us that every ending is also a beginning. Her voice is silent now, but her song continues in each of us. We are her legacy. We are her living melody. And as long as we keep singing, as long as we keep loving, as long as we keep hoping, she will never truly be gone. The congregation stood and sang Love Continues, the song Hope had written for her mother so many years earlier. But now it was being sung for her. Love doesn't end when breathing stops. Love doesn't fade when hearts grow still. Love just changes. Love transcends. Love continues, always will. Hope Sterling was buried beside her parents and Richard in the same Queen's Cemetery where she had once sang to her father's grave. Her headstone bore a simple inscription. Hope Sterling. Beloved daughter, faithful servant. She made beautiful music from broken things. Her song lives on. Years passed. Decades passed. The Hope Sterling Foundation continued its work around the world. The Grace Sterling Memorial Foundation provided comfort to thousands of grieving families. Hope Academies opened in dozens of cities, giving musical education to underprivileged children. And in a small hospital in Manhattan, there is still a plaque in the room where it all began. In memory of Hope Sterling, chaplain, singer, daughter of God. In this room, she learned that broken instruments can still make beautiful music. Her song changed the world. But perhaps the greatest testament to Hope's life isn't found in any building or foundation. It's found in the countless lives she touched. The former patients who became healers themselves. The children she taught who grew up to teach others. The hearts she softened that went on to soften other hearts. The hope she gave that continues to spread like ripples on a pond. Today, somewhere in the world, there's a little girl or boy facing impossible circumstances. Their family has no money. Their dreams seem too big. Their situation looks hopeless. But if they could hear Hope's story, they would know the truth. God sees them. God has a plan. God can make beautiful music from their broken pieces too. Use the comments to share your own stories of hope and transformation. How has faith changed your life? What dreams are you still believing for? I want to read every single story and be inspired by your journey. Because Hope Sterling's greatest lesson wasn't about music or ministry or miracles. It was about this simple truth. No matter how broken you are, no matter how lost you feel, no matter how impossible your situation seems, there is always hope. There is always love. There is always a song waiting to be sung. God is not finished with your story. Keep believing. Keep singing. Keep hoping. The best is yet to come. Love always wins. Faith always matters. Hope never dies. This is the story of Hope Sterling. But it could be your story too. The music is just beginning.